up, Georgia view, and right, I want comp 2, and we want student view. And we wait, and we wait, and we wait. Okay, so what you are going to do, right, when you get to this screen, go to the assessments bar, and in the drop-down menu, select assignments. So what this gives you then is a folder for each of the course assignments that you're going to have to upload. Now, the homework assignments from the textbook are all down here, right? And they're all sort of noted here by page number. So because what you did for today is assignment 3 on page 37 in the textbook, right? That's the folder it goes into. So if you uploaded it into the wrong folder, if you couldn't figure out how to upload it, right, this is how you do it. You click on that, and it will allow you to submit the file. Now, the other thing to note, I could give you a PDF of Chapter 1 to make sure everybody has it, but copyright law is a real thing, and publishers can be really, really, really litigious. So I can't give you more chapters than that from the textbook without breaking laws. So you are going to have to acquire your own copy of Writing Analytically as soon as possible. If this places any kind of undue financial burden on you, or if you just can't do it yet, come talk to me. Also, if you have a copy and would be willing to share it temporarily, come talk to me. And we'll try to pair you up for the moment with somebody who already has a textbook so that you can maybe work with it together. Okay? Okay, right. Any other questions about how to upload homework? Or yeah, Vivica.
This is the file for like what you just did with the picture and the. Okay.
Exactly.
I just want to make sure because now I know I put it in the wrong one.
Yeah. So if you haven't been able to upload that yet, If you did upload it to the wrong folder, make sure you go in and upload it to the right folder, because all of the grades are kind of keyed to an online grade book, and it just makes my life easier.
Okay.
Thanks. Yes.
So I wasn't here when anything was explained, so I don't even know what you're talking about.
Okay, the syllabus is on Georgia View. It's in the course browser. I know you were not registered for the class yet. I did email a video of last class to everywhere. I'm taping every class. It's going on a YouTube playlist. So if you weren't here, go back and watch that. That will explain some things to you about what we're doing. If you have specific questions about the syllabus or assignments, talk to me outside of class. Okay. Any other questions?
Do we have a syllabus quiz?
No, I don't do that. No. Anything else? All right. Then, the first thing I want to try to talk about today is the sort of habits of mind that you should be trying to cultivate to become a stronger writer and a stronger thinker, and how some of the patterns that we learn in our earlier education can damage our ability to think independently. So what we're actually shooting for, the state of mind that I want you to try to cultivate, is what the poet John Keats called negative capability. Now, what negative capability means is, first and foremost, an openness to evidence and to experience. Right? It's allowing yourself to get comfortable with uncertainty, with not having an answer for something right away. With slowing down, looking at the picture that's in front of you, the video, the text, whatever, breaking it down into its parts and letting those parts speak to you. Now, the way we're often taught in high school, I think, tends to discourage this kind of thinking. Right? Now, how many of you were usually sort of rewarded in high school for having your hand up quick and having an answer? Yeah. That's the way it tends to work, right? The person who can get the right answer the fastest gets the participation points, right? The person who gets the right answer the fastest gets into the teacher's good graces. Now, one thing that I want to make very clear here is that in a course like this, there are no objectively right answers. There are answers that are objectively wrong. But there are no obvious right answers here, right? If you're making an argument from information that is factually incorrect, right, that's a wrong answer. But there are often going to be multiple ways you can interpret the sorts of things we are going to be studying. So try not to think in terms of what is the right answer. Try instead to think of what is the best answer given the available evidence. Right? You won't always be coming to the same conclusions about what the best answer is, right? You will have to learn to argue your case. You will have to learn how to build an argument using evidence, right? So that's what we're here to do. A couple of other habits that we need to try to either cultivate or unlearn here, right? Now, when you see a movie, read a book, watch a TV show, play a video game, whatever, and you're talking about it with a friend, what's usually the first thing you say about that movie, book, video game, TV show, whatever?
If it's good or bad.
If it's good or bad, I liked it or I didn't like it, right? A sort of quick, evaluative response. So one thing that we want to try to get away from is that reflexive like-dislike answer, right? We are bombarded with all kinds of stimuli all the time, right? And as we get older, our brains try to get more efficient. They try to learn how to work faster by filtering out things that maybe aren't important to the task we're immediately working on. This is one of the ways our brains tend to do that, right? We sort of short-circuit argument, we short-circuit analysis by deciding quickly whether something is worth our time or is not worth our time. So what I want you to do, particularly when you're reading something that you really, really dislike, or viewing something that you really, really dislike, try to focus on what specific feature of this you dislike. Right? What is it about this thing that bothers you? and think about why it bothers you. Right? You don't have to like everything that your instructors put in front of you. Right? I am fully expecting that a lot of the things that I give you to read, you're not going to enjoy reading, right? This is not going to be a pleasurable experience for you 100% all the way. What I do want you to do when you don't like something, right, instead of just sort of shutting down and deciding that this is not worth the slog, right, this is not worth your time, again, just focus on something specific in there that's bugging you and think about why. What's wrong with this? Why doesn't this speak to me? Why does this irritate me? Whatever. And that'll give you a way in to start picking it apart and to start analyzing it. Now, related to this, one other thing that our brains tend to do to sort of reduce the amount of work we have to do in our everyday dealings with people, our everyday lives, right? We tend to fall back on what we think are common sense arguments, right? Well, that's just common sense. Essentially, though, what common sense means is what common sense refers to, right, is our unexamined beliefs. Right? Things that we think, things that we believe because everyone around us thinks them and because we've grown up thinking them. So we kind of internalize these ideas and we tend to think of them as normal, right? Well, this is what everybody thinks. But what you regard as common sense is actually going to be pretty subjective. It's going to depend a lot on where you grew up, your ethnic background, your socioeconomic class background, your religious background, right? All sorts of factors come into play here. So to give you an example, as you've all by now figured out, right, I'm not from here, right? Go figure, right? Big surprise. Yeah, I am not. I'm not. Look, I didn't grow up here. I'm from Northeast Pennsylvania originally. Now there are some similarities between Southwest Georgia and Northeast Pennsylvania. They're both pretty rural. There's a lot of farmland in both areas. But if we start looking at, say, people's ethnic backgrounds in both areas, Northeast Pennsylvania, at least when I was growing up there, was really, really super white and really, really super Catholic. Yes?
What does that say under unexamined?
Beliefs. Unexamined beliefs, yeah. There was one black kid in my elementary school. He was 2 years ahead of me. Everybody knew him, Waverly Henry, because he was the only black kid in the school. Right? So, everybody I grew up around was Irish or Polish. Right? Everybody had a family history in coal mining. Just about everybody went to church on Sundays, but then didn't talk about it outside of Sunday. A lot of people hunted, but very few people carried guns outside of a hunting context, right? People didn't say leave guns in their cars. People didn't usually carry guns around on their persons. So when I come to Southwest Georgia, right, now this is not the first place I've lived after leaving Northeast Pennsylvania. I was in, I lived in various neighborhoods in New York City for a while. I lived in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years, and then I came down here. But there were, sort of profound differences in what people considered normal. For example, can anybody guess what just about the first question people would ask me when they met me when I first moved down here was.
Where are you from?
That was actually not usually the first.
Where do you go to church?
Have you found a church home yet? Yes. That was usually the first question I got.
Yeah.
And I understand sort of now that there was, people trying to be welcoming and say, hey, come try out our church. But because of where I came from and my own background, it felt nosy, right? It felt invasive. Because where I come from, people aren't necessarily less religious, but they're less likely to talk about it, right? We don't assume that people are looking for a church when we meet them. We never talk about church, really. You can be friends with somebody for 20 years and never know what church they go to or if they go to church. There was another, little phrase, like I noticed, people would say, I appreciate you a lot. And that, made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, At first, oh, that's nice. You appreciate me. That's sweet. And then I realized it was just thank you. And it's like, oh, well, fuck. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, my dad lives in New York, so like up north, the religious thing is kind of like the last thing that they think about. It's like,
Right.
When you get towards Pennsylvania and stuff like that, it's like out the window.
It's essentially it's a different attitude towards personal privacy, right? And towards what people keep private. It's not, again, as I said, that people are less religious necessarily. It's that it's not considered anyone else's business.
Yeah. When my dad moved up there, he was going to church all the time. When he moved there, it was like he forgot. He just doesn't even know what church is anymore. So. Well, I just know that you go around. He works in the city. Nobody on Sunday, they're thinking about business. They're not talking about church or anything like that.
Yeah. So I mean, there are also those sorts of differences that are centered around workplace activities. I'm just sort of trying to point to a couple of little differences just that show that what one person assumes to be normal, what I assumed to be normal based on my experiences and my background, was not what was considered to be normal here. Right? So, I kind of needed to adjust my perspective of what was normal, what was common sense, in order to feel comfortable here, right? And what you are going to need to learn to do with the sorts of things that I give you, right? These are going to come from different time periods, from different cultures. Many of them are going to be texts in translation, right? So what you're going to need to learn to do is read sympathetically. And what I mean by that is read without trying to impose your own values and assumptions on what it is you're reading or what it is you're watching. Instead, what you need to try to do is figure out what values the piece itself seems to be endorsing, right? You're going to need to try to figure out what we call the rhetoric of whatever text you're looking at. Now, does anybody know what this word means, rhetoric, what we mean when we talk about rhetoric? It's part of it.
The organization generally uses language.
Yeah, although it's not always verbal.
That's true.
Right? Visual images have a rhetoric as well, right? What a rhetoric is a means of persuasion. Everything you look at, even if it doesn't seem to, even if it doesn't intend this, has a rhetoric, right? It's trying to persuade you of something, right? This classroom has a rhetoric, which we sort of touched upon a little bit last time, right? The fact that everything in the class is oriented forward for you to look at the teacher, right? Suggests that what this classroom wants you to do, the way it wants you to behave, is to sit in neat little rows, look forward and pay attention, right? We examined me, right? I have a rhetoric, right? I am trying to persuade you of sort of, well, one, I'm trying to persuade you that this shit actually matters, right? And that you should actually listen and pay attention. But some of you noted that I was also trying to persuade you that I am an approachable human, right? That I'm not, scary teacher ogre, right? So people have a rhetoric. Architecture has a rhetoric, right? Everything has some sort of rhetoric. Everything is trying to persuade you of something. And the way you try to figure out how that works and what that is by looking at the parts of that thing, right? Breaking it into pieces and figuring out how those parts are related to each other. Let's think back to that Diego Rivera painting that we looked at the end of last class. What were the two most important parts of that painting if we split it up into parts?
Contrast imagery.
Okay, there's the contrast and the imagery, right? What's the contrast?
It was like the workers and then like the bosses or something.
Yeah, you had the workers kind of looming above, right, with weapons and tools, kind of looking threatening, and the intellectuals sitting in front of them, not looking at what's going on behind them, looking forward or looking up or looking at anything but back at the workers. So the rhetoric there, the thing that picture is trying to persuade you of, right, is that these intellectuals are caught up in their own worlds and don't see the revolution that's coming behind them. Right? That's the viewpoint that picture is trying to express. Now, it's not always going to be as clear-cut as that. It usually won't be as clear-cut as that. But one way that we figure out the rhetoric of a piece is by paying close attention to language or imagery, right? One thing we want to think about when we're talking about language is where it fits in on a scale of what we call abstraction. Now, what does it mean if a word is abstract or concrete? If you read the chapter carefully, you should know this. What is an abstract word? What's the difference between an abstract word and a concrete word?
One represents something that is not quite the word itself, and then the other is just the literal meaning.
That's close, kind of, yeah. An abstract word is a conceptual word. It's a word for a concept. Right? It's a word that often doesn't have any particular sensory reality for us. A concrete word is a word that gives us more sensory detail. So, arranged from most abstract to most concrete, right? I'm going to take three words here, right? Color, red, crimson. Right, so color is the basic concept expressed here, right? Red is a not especially specific way of expressing that concept that still gives you a sense impression, right? We all know what red looks like. Crimson is a specific shade of red, and that specific shade of red is going to have a range of associative meanings that the more abstract words do not. Right, so we call these connotations. And yet they're concepts that we associate with a particular word. So what connotations, like what associations do we have with a word like crimson, right? What sorts of things does this word call up for us?
Blood.
Blood, yeah. Good. Anything else? I mean, blood's a good one.
Love.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Thine bleeding crimson heart, yes.
Rose petals.
Rose petals, yeah.
Heat.
Heat. Right, the crimson flames. Good. Right, the fact that it calls up images of blood is it can also conjure up images of violence, right? So a connotation, or a more concrete word, is going to give you a wider range of these connotations, a wider range of these associative meanings than a more abstract word is. And so one of the things you're going to need to do when you're looking at a piece of text is, again, think about why this particular word. What range of associations is the author here trying to call up, and why? Now, levels of language are going to matter here as well too, right? Language tends to work very, very efficiently. There's really no such thing as a true synonym, right? If a word becomes redundant, we tend to just stop using it. So I'm going to give you an example here. I'm going to write 3 words on the board. And you are going to tell me if these 3 words mean the same thing.
Yes and no.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. Yeah, yes and no. Why and no?
Because the first word can be used so in many different situations.
Okay.
But the other 2 can only be used in like 1 or 2.
Well,
Yeah.
Also, the other ones have different connotations.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
bowel movement is an action,
Scientific.
Yeah,
more so.
yeah.
It's more of a description.
They all refer to the same bodily function, right, ultimately. But yeah, as you said, shit has other uses. Defecate is a more scientific sort of term, right? And bowel movement is a polite euphemism that prevents you from having to really mention the thing itself, right? Now, one thing about these is all 3 of these have different histories and different linguistic origins. This is actually one of the oldest words in the English language.
Shite.
Right, yeah. It comes from, yeah, like the earliest layer of what we can call English, a language that we now call Anglo-Saxon. You'll sometimes hear that called Old English as well, right? And that is actually a really, really important thing to say, right? I know some people will say, oh, Shakespeare wrote in Old English. No, Shakespeare did not write in Old English. Shakespeare wrote in a slightly archaic form of modern English. Old English is a completely different language that if you are not trained in it, you will probably not be able to read and understand, with the exception of a couple of special little words like this one. Now, does anybody know what language the second word comes from originally?
I would have to assume Latin.
Yeah. It comes originally from Latin. Good. And what about the third? Think mouvement. Yes. Originally from French. There are reasons for this, right? There are reasons why these same 3 words are used in such different ways in such different contexts, even though we mean the same thing by them. And it all comes down to something that happened in England in 1066. Does anybody know what that was? Yeah, you can take a stab at it. There's no penalty if you guess wrong.
Dictionary?
Pardon?
Dictionary?
No, actually the first modern English dictionary doesn't appear until the 18th century. Dictionaries are actually a really very recent invention in the grand scale of human time, right? Now, what happened in 1066 at the Battle of Hastings, an army of French soldiers led by the Duke of Normandy, then called William the Bastard, conquers England. And so, this changes the cultural mix in England, and it changes the way people speak. Suddenly, all of the elite in the country are speaking French. Right, so French becomes the language of the sorts of activities elite people are involved in. Cooking, fashion, military life, law. And if you look at the English language today, most of our words that come from those areas of life are derived from French. Polite euphemisms also tend to be derived from French. So what this means is that the English, who were the people already living on the island, right, they become the lower classes. They become, so they're out of power. We can see this reflected in comparisons between another set of words here. So let's see, hen, pig, bull. Poultry, pork, beef. Okay. The name of the animal is derived from English because it was an English-speaking peasant that raised it. The name of the food is derived from French because it's a French lord who ate it. And Latin was the sort of international language of scholarship. It was the language that was used in the medieval Catholic Church. And so that's how that kind of spreads around Europe. But yeah, the reason why we consider words like shit vulgar is because they were peasant words, right? Peasant words for usually for something kind of unpleasant, like a body function, right? Nothing's going to happen to me if I stand up here and tap dance and just say shit, 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 right? I'm not going to get struck by lightning. It would be extremely irresponsible of me to do that for 75 minutes when I'm supposed to be teaching this class. But you get my point, right? The reason why we relegate certain kinds of words to the realm of vulgarity has more to do with their history and with who spoke those words than it does with anything inherent in the word itself, right? The word itself is just a sound. So that's one more way we can sort of deal with connotation here, right? Connotations are going to differ depending on the level of language you're talking about. Words that we consider vulgar are going to have associations that words we don't consider vulgar don't. Okay, so use of specific language or imagery is one way a piece tries to persuade you of something, right? Generally, what you need to try to figure out when you're looking at something is not just what does this want me to think, but also what assumptions is this making about me in order to try to persuade me? Right? What does the person who is targeting me with this rhetoric think I already believe? What does this person think my values or interests are? To give you a quick example, how many of you have seen those ads for Popeye's chicken restaurants? There's a woman who calls herself Annie who wears an apron and talks about how she made this chicken for you or she made this shrimp for you. Everybody knows that Annie's not real, right? Everybody gets that there is no Annie, that she does not make all the chicken in a Popeye's restaurant, and she does not, in fact, love you.
No.
I'm sorry. I mean, someone was going to have to tell you eventually, right?
It's just a paid person.
Yeah, she's not. Yeah, no, yeah, she's a paid spokesperson, right? She's an actor from Illinois.
Wow.
She's not even from Louisiana.
It's very
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah. Oh, I looked this up.
Oh.
But why is it that Popeyes wants you to think that there is a person, at least in some central kitchen, who means you well and is making all of these recipes up?
So you feel catered and taken care of.
So you feel comfortable,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? It's like, oh, hey, they've got a chef working there who makes up these recipes and then, just serves them up to me. That's great, right? We feel more comfortable if we can identify the sort of, foodstuffs coming out of that clown face window with an identifiable human being, right? So I'm going to show you a couple of advertisements. I mean, not to sort of stick with the fast food thing a little bit too much, but these are McDonald's advertisements for from different eras, right? And so what I want you to do as you watch these, right, you should be furiously scribbling as you do this. The first thing I want you to do with each of these ads, have I been writing with the bad marker all this time? I suppose I have. All right, first, oh, they're both bad markers, great. Break each of the ads down into various parts, right? Visual parts, right? Individual pieces of visual imagery. Secondly, musical or other sort of oral parts, right? Things that you hear. And finally, right, thematic parts, right? Does the commercial seem to have a plot, right? Is there some sort of movement from beginning to end in the commercial, right, where things change? I also want you to think about, as you're doing this, who the intended audience is, right? Who they're trying to hit with this. And what assumptions do they make about this audience? Right. What do they seem to believe this particular audience wants? Okay. And of course, we have our over-aggressive screensaver. Certainly loud.
Hard-nosed Mrs. Hatcher, talk fast, you can't get
Today we'll be reading chapters 3, 4.
You can never win her over.
Thanks, Judith.
I'll do this. Catcher had no pet. Forget the excuses, there's no way to reach her. My homework flew out the bus window. I didn't do it. Our only break was a substitute teacher. Mrs. Hatcher's absent, there will be no test. When things got rough, I'll never forget it. She made us stick to it. Gee, boy. I got it. I knew you could do it. Just put DLC fries and cocoa from your third grade. Pineapple Mrs. Hatcher. It's been a year since we met you. And what we wanted to say is we'll never forget you.
Okay, so, do you feel sick yet?
Yeah.
I know that one of these semesters I'm going to show this commercial to a bunch of students, and somebody's going to get diabetes, and I'm going to get sued. All right, so let's start by trying to break this down into parts. Let's start with visually what we see here. What is prominently displayed here visually?
Teacher and a class.
Okay, yeah, teacher and a classroom full of grade school aged kids. Now, can we get more specific about both of these?
Not
It was an older.
Okay, the teacher is older, right? Looks to be sort of somewhere in late middle age. And what about the kids?
They're pretty young.
Yeah, the kids are young, quite young. Anything else you noticed about these kids?
They seem to be having kind of a boring day.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
They're at least at the very beginning not very happy about being in school, right?
Struggling with depression.
What's that?
Struggling with depression.
They don't like school, yeah. A lot of them are in general struggling, right? They seem to be having a hard time in the class. What do you notice was missing from that classroom by and large?
A clock.
Even clocks. You're fixated on clocks.
White?
It's a very, very white classroom, right?
Oh yeah, there was that
Oh.
black kid.
Yeah. There's one black kid. He's the only person of color in the whole commercial, right? This is actually very important. Yeah, these are, for the most part, white kids. Anything else visually strike you in this commercial?
I thought it was weird that the classroom was dark.
Okay, yeah, the classroom's dark. Good.
I had a substitute that was young.
Yeah, young substitute. And the young sub seems cool, right? It's like, no test, guys. Right? Yay. Now, is the only location we see the classroom? Where else do we go? We go to McDonald's, right? And how is the McDonald's differently lit from the classroom?
Yeah,
Very
it's all
bright.
bright.
Yes. The classroom is dark. The McDonald's is very, very bright. Yeah. That is the light at the end of the dark tunnel, right?
Also, the music picked up. It got a little like cheerier and less depressing.
Okay, yeah. Let's actually let's move now from the visual here to the music, right? What do we notice about the music? It starts slow and picks up, right?
They had some creepy child singing it.
There's a lot
Yep.
of creepy children singing it.
Yeah. But we start with an individual creepy child singing it, right? And then we build to a multitude of creepy child voices. Okay. Now this commercial was made in 1988. Even by the standards of 1988, does the music in the commercial sound contemporary?
Not really. I mean, I guess relatively sure, but maybe not by modern standards.
Yeah, it's definitely not like a modern pop kind of thing, right?
I mean, it's still in like the contemporary, general frame of things, but no.
In that it was made in 1988.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the song, there's the clarinet in there, right, and the piano, right? The song kind of sounds old-fashioned, right? Now, if we look at the structure of the ad, right, just the way it's put together, what's the basic plot line here?
School's boring.
Yeah.
McDonald's is fun.
Life is hard and teacher is mean, right?
Except the sub.
Except the sub.
And then things get easier.
Yeah. Yeah, how does the relationship with the teacher change in the middle of the ad?
She takes him to McDonald's.
Is she taking them to
Or
McDonald's?
they took her.
They take her to McDonald's, right?
Oh.
But why do they take her to McDonald's? What happens in the intervening moments?
She
Like,
changed
like,
from
Yeah, she's helping them and pushing them, right? So they realize that she wasn't a mean teacher, right? She just wants them to do their best, right? Right? She pushes them. Right? And then students take her to McDonald's and give her a t-shirt. Okay. So what I want you to try to think about here, who is this ad aimed at?
Grandparents.
Why would you say grandparents, Zoe?
Well, one, because clearly the actual real teacher got more attention than the younger one.
Okay.
And then the way the music is set up, it's like,
Okay, so there is like a kind of nostalgia thing they're trying to go for, right? They're trying to tweak those nostalgia notes in your psyche. And you think because so much attention is focused on an older person that it's aiming at grandparents, right? What else do you guys think? Who else do you think this might be aimed at?
young children.
Is it actually aimed at children? Think about this, right? One, do children have much money to spend?
No.
And two, can children get to McDonald's on their own?
Well, parents, because
Yeah.
kids
Yes.
get happy when they go to McDonald's.
Exactly. Very good. Yes, it's aimed
Yeah.
at parents of young children.
Using that compassion that the parents have for these struggling kids.
And is it just using their compassion for the struggling kids?
Very compassionate
Is-
for the teacher.
Yeah, they're hitting.
Celebration.
Yeah, they're hitting that nostalgia note for the parents too, right? To remember that teacher who made you do your best, right? So pile the whole family into the minivan and take them to McDonald's. Right? That's another thing I think we need to think about here, right? Is it where? Generally speaking, what kind of neighborhood do you think they're aiming at here?
Suburban middle class.
Yep, suburban middle class neighborhood. Right? The sort of place where you would probably have to drive to a McDonald's. So I'm going to show you another ad that's much more recent. And I want you to tell me what is different in this one, right? How has their marketing strategy changed since 1988?
Ladies and gentlemen, introducing an indulgent interlude, a melodic mocha melody, blended like chocolate and coffee. You're gonna want to sip this through a straw. This isn't a kiddie sweet fix. It's a sophisticated stirring that'll warm your soul and tingle your toes, whipping emotions like cream. Here, for the first time, drizzling chocolate in your ear, ready to hit your sweet spot is Dwelle.
Sometimes you need a kiss in the middle of the day, baby. The sweetest kiss that ever come your way besides me. I gotta love, up in the cafe. A new sensation. Ooh, touch of sweet, just like a cream. You know what I mean? I love how you blend when you blend, so you overtake me. want you to experience the new sensation with the flavor today. A new vibration, like McDonald's McCafe. I'm here anytime, day. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. So what's different here?
They targeted
The races?
Okay, that's the big obvious difference here, right? Yes.
and they're targeting older.
Yeah.
Like young couple.
Exactly. Yeah. There are no children at all in this video, right? This looks like a nightclub where children would not be permitted anyway, at least not by any responsible parent. And
Yeah, who would let their kid have caffeine at
I know.
night?
Yeah.
It's horrible.
But yeah. And they even the announcer even says, right, this isn't a kiddie sweet fix, right? Everything that we're getting in this commercial says not for children. Right down to the sexy, funky music, right? Can we all agree that the music has very much improved at the very least? This is way, way better than the children's chorus in the 1988 commercial. What's that? It's okay. You know, pass this class and you won't have to. So what else can we say about what's different here? Pardon?
There's more.
Well, yeah, right. It's a black audience, black artist, black announcer, and they're not focusing on hamburgers here either, right? It's just the coffee. That's all we see is the coffee drink with the whipped cream, right? And it's young couples cuddling together, being playful, right? Everybody in the room is well dressed, looks cool, right? Trying to undo that sort of hokey, nostalgic image that the company had in the 80s, right? Trying to convince you that this is a different McDonald's now. Right? Hey, McDonald's is cool, right? McDonald's can change with the times. And they're not aiming at that white suburban audience anymore, right? They're clearly aiming for young, childless urban couples here who want to hang out and listen to good music at night and have the money and leisure time to do so. So on the one hand, this does reflect certain societal changes that have occurred over the last 30 years. But it also sort of shows that the company is trying to open up in a completely different market and develop a different image for itself, right? It's trying to convince you now that it's not the same thing it was 30 years ago. Right? Times have changed and so has McDonald's. Right? Last thing I want to show you here, and then we'll wrap it up. We'll call it a day. Basically, by the way, what we're doing here with these videos, this is what I'm going to want you to do with the next homework assignment. Right? Think about who this is aimed at and what it's assuming about them and what they already believe. I will give you an article that you will all be picking apart, right? I'll email it to you sometime tonight. And then you'll have till before class on Tuesday to do it. But yeah, I want you to do the same thing with this short little comedy sketch, right? What I want you to think about here is how this is playing with our assumptions about certain very conventionally masculine perceptions, right? Professions, right?
Yes, a lumberjack, leaping from tree to tree as they float down the mighty rivers of British Columbia. The giant redwood, the larch, the fir, the mighty Scots pine, or a bit like Nettie Terrace, the smell of fresh-cut timber, the crash of mighty trees. With my best girl by my side, we'd sing, sing, sing. lumberjack and I'm okay. I sleep all night and I work all day. He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day. I cut down trees, I eat my lunch, I go to the lavatory. On Wednesday I go shopping and have buttered scones for tea. He cuts down trees, he eats his lunch, he goes to the lavatory. On Wednesday he goes shopping and has buttered scones for tea. He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day. I cut down trees, I skip and jump, I like to press wildflowers. I put on women's clothing and hang around in bars. He cuts down trees, he skips and jumps, he likes to press wildflowers. He puts on women's clothing and hangs around in bars. He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day. I cut down trees, I wear a heel, suspenders and a bra. I wish I'd been a girlie, just like my dear papa. I cut down trees, I wear high heels, suspenders and a bra. I wish I'd been a girlie, just like my dear papa.
Okay, so what happens that makes you start laughing a little bit uncomfortably here?
He talks about cross-dressing and hanging out at bars.
Yeah, the first verse, right? He's singing about very conventionally masculine sorts of things, right? I like to cut down trees, you know, and I eat my lunch, and I go to the toilet, right? I do all of those things. And as long as he's, you know, to like all of his male buddies, right, these singing Canadian Mounties are with him. But when he starts revealing that he has habits that we regard as conventionally feminine, everybody starts to abandon him, right? He starts listing his other hobbies in the second verse, right? I like to press wildflowers, I skip and jump, right? I put on women's clothing and hang around in bars, right? And then they all start looking at each other, and you know, when he admits a desire to be a woman, right? You know, he's a lumberjack, right? Now, do any of these things that he wants to do impair his ability to cut down trees?
No. Well, maybe the high heels, but...
Okay, yeah, it would probably, but
yeah.
It's also clear that he's doing that on his own time, right? He's not doing that on the job. But his girlfriend and his little masculine cohort there, right? They can't deal with him not fitting a particular masculine stereotype. And we're sort of put in the frame of like people who are laughing at this guy for, you know, honestly saying who and what he is, right? So the assumption that it makes about us is that we share the same sort of beliefs about conventional masculinity that these Mounties do and that the girlfriend does, right? And so it's kind of unsettling us by making us laugh at this guy. All right, so this is basically what I want you to do with the article I'm going to give you, right? You are going to think about what the writer of the article assumes about your values, your beliefs, right? What does the author seem to take for granted that you believe?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. What you're doing with the article I'm going to give you, right? You are going to, in 500 words, right? Be clear about that. 500 words. Tell me what the author of the article seems to believe about you, right? What assumptions are they making about you? Your beliefs, your values, your interests, whatever. Try to think about also what the assumed audience for this piece is, right? Level of education, level of interest in the topic, level of knowledge about the topic, that sort of thing. If you have any questions as you are working on it, right, do feel free to email me. If you have any trouble uploading this assignment.
And then we put it in the next 1 days?
Exactly, yeah, you're going to put it in the, it's going to say, you know, assignment 3, page 68, I think, right?
Okay.
Yep.
And that's due before class.
That'll be due before class next Tuesday, yep.
All right.
All right. So have a good weekend. We will see you next Tuesday.
The argument clinic would have been a good one.